It's divine. It really is. It's the most wonderful, the feeling of being in love and having that last is, I think, the deepest, most wonderful human emotion you can have.
If only there was a poll of how many marriages were in that mediocre range.
You know, I keep remembering the way it was the first year of our marriage. We had something then that seems to have slipped away from us. In those days, there was nobody in the whole world but just you and me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about everything that has to do with developing femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships. I'm Sherry Lynn, and I am here with my mom, Dixie Annalyn Forsyth. Hi.
Hi.
So today we are talking mostly to the married ladies. We're talking about whether or not fascinating womanhood is needed in your marriage. Why are we talking about this today?
Because people ask about it, question it. Sometimes I've personally puzzled this question because I can see the incredible value of it in my own marriage, in my life, in the life of people that I know who've practiced these principles. But I have friends who seem content with the relationships that they have, even though from my perspective, it doesn't look particularly romantic. It's like they've settled into a comfortable kind of relationship and they are okay with it. But for those of us who really want that you feel when you fall in love with your husband and you can't wait to marry him, they don't want that to fade or end. You want it to be a deep, lifelong love affair with your husband. That's what Fascinating Womanhood is for, and it has saved thousands and thousands of marriages.
I think there's two really large components to Fascinating Womanhood. There's the marriage part, which is what we're talking about today, and then there's the part that focuses on you and your kind of self-esteem and your confidence and all that. And I think sometimes women might be seeing Fascinating Womanhood as a book and saying, well, I don't really need any of that. I think that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. Well, do you need it in your marriage? And that's actually how it started.
Maybe
Can you explain just briefly why your mom wrote, what started her to write, what inspired her to write the book?
The reason she got interested in this subject was because her own marriage, she deeply was in love with my father. But after a few years and several kids, and they fell into kind of a, they still went on dates and they still loved each other, but it was kind of mediocre.
Right.
Is the word that comes to mind. It just sort of lacked that romance that she was wanting. So she went to the library. There was no internet then. She went to the local library, and the only books she could find on marriage were really about sex. So she looked around. She's a woman of faith. She prayed about it a lot, and she came across, without getting into the whole thing, these little booklets that inspired her and kind of put her in the right path for the road that she took to find these principles of Fascinating Womanhood, which, by the way, immediately, just practicing some of them immediately made her marriage so much more romantic. My dad started telling her really romantic things. He'd walk in the door and pick her up and swing her around when he got home from work. And it was just magical for her. And so she wanted to share that. And that's what we want. We want strong homes. And to have strong homes, you've got to have strong marriages where husband and wife, mom and dad stay together whenever possible and raise their families, whether they have children or not. Strong, loving homes. And that's what makes strong nations. Nothing else does. Because we're being actively taught to be more like men, that to be more masculine is to be more appealing. And it's just not true. We're not playing to our strengths.
If only there was a poll of how many marriages were in that mediocre range that you just described. I would be so curious, because there's so many marriages that are just mediocre, and that's fine. If you're happy with that, I think that's great. We're not trying to say that everyone has to have something different, but if you do, which I think the vast majority of you do, want a happier marriage, not mediocre, that's what we're going to discuss today. So we're going to talk about the 3 most common issues that we're asked about. And I mean, we narrowed it down to these 3. We could have done probably 10, but these main 3 are what we are messaged about and asked about constantly. I'm talking daily. These 3 categories, we're going to go through 3 categories of issues that are happening, bigger issues that are happening in marriages. And then we're going to address specifically how Fascinating Womanhood can help you with those 3 categories.
Right.
The first one is most common, I think. You've just drifted apart.
Under that we put distractions, other priorities. Sometimes a person's real driving, sometimes two of them, driving career can take you in different directions, and you meet at home for maybe not even for dinner, and then you're back at it again. And so you become a little bit like strangers, where you don't spend enough time together, where you don't continually know that person.
Yeah, and I don't think the distractions are necessarily bad things. I don't want to say for people watching this to think, well, my career isn't really a distraction. Well, it's more so that your marriage has taken a back seat to something else. And kids can also be a distraction.
Yes.
And the kids are wonderful, and we want to have strong families, but your marriage taking a back seat to your kids can cause you to drift apart. And we're going to discuss a little bit more about that when we talk about how Fascinating Women can help you. Okay, what's the second one?
No romance. Which most women, we like it. That's what prompts us to get married in the first place. With little quality time, low or poor intimacy, you feel a little bit like roommates.
You might be drifting apart and you have no romance, because sometimes those two go hand in hand with each other.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you marry someone for financial reasons, you might not have much romance in the beginning, but most of us, I think, marry for love.
There might be a strong relationship where you are spending a lot of time together and you're not drifting apart, but you just don't have I like to call it the warm and fuzzies, the kind of the butterflies, the warm and fuzzies, the feelings where you're excited to be together. What are we going to do when we're alone? And those kind of things. That there might just be that missing.
Even though I've been married for 52 years, when Bob walks in the door, my heart thumps. It still does.
But it's not because you just were handed that.
No,
Working on it. And I think that's the biggest.
It's been nurtured day by day. And I'm sorry, I get a little bit emotional, but he walks in and I don't know, it's still there. And it's a great feeling. It's one of the best feelings that there is. Wouldn't everybody, I want that for everybody.
I think the most common misconception about that, though, is that it's just natural and you're lucky.
No,
I think I'm guilty of thinking that when I was younger, a teenager. I'm like, oh, they're just, that's just how they are. But as I've gotten older, I understand it more. And I've seen what you all do to invest in your relationship. And that's the result of all the investment that you've put into it. And I think people don't really understand that.
Most of it has been my understanding of the principles of Fascinating Womanhood, not Bob. He responds to it, and he wants a good marriage, but how to do it, he has no idea. So me practicing these principles, then he responds to it. And it isn't like we sit down and talk about all these things together. We don't. He responds to it, and he, of course, loves it. And that's why it's not manipulative, because he wants it just like I do, but just he has no idea how to get there. And the principles in this book are the guideline.
The third one
is really tough. It's infidelity. All of these things kind of are connected
to one another.
They can be. I mean, there's no infidelity in some marriages, but when there is infidelity, you've also probably drifted apart and don't have romance. So infidelity, which can also be broken trust, abandonment, you feel mismatched. And under that also would have to add addictions, because addictions can cause people to become unfaithful. Some addictions actually kind of change people's personalities, where you feel like, I don't know that person anymore.
The overarching theme under infidelity is really about broken trust, because when you're talking about addictions and you're talking about, even if it's just an emotional broken trust, it's not a physical or sexual affair, there's still the broken trust if it's emotional.
Yeah, and a broken trust can also be if, like, say he's gotten into some addiction and he spends money without telling you. I knew a couple where the husband took money out of their 401k that his wife had heavily deposited and did not tell her. And so that was he didn't cheat on her, but the broken trust was devastating.
Unfortunately, we put that one in here as the top 3 because we hear about it that much. You would think that if you're somebody that hasn't experienced it, you might think like, oh, that doesn't happen that often. It really does. It happens a lot.
Well, and if you happen to have married a man who is not basically a good man. Okay,
so now we're going to jump into the 3 different categories and how Fascinating Womanhood can specifically help you in those circumstances. before we jump into this, just want to reiterate, if your guy is got some serious problems, like we just mentioned, if he is not a good man, if he is a criminal, if he is abusive, we could go on and on, that this is not the list for you. And you need to seek something more professional, such as counseling or something like that.
Really check into it.
We're not telling women that are being abused to try
Well, part of Fascinating Womanhood is setting boundaries, and that's definitely something you need to do.
So the first one is about drifting apart. So what are some of the answers for if you've drifted apart?
All of Fascinating Womanhood, but we focus more on making him number one. You mentioned it, touched on it a little earlier with, even your family. Your family can be a distraction, but that meaning if you put your children first and your husband comes down the list, and it doesn't mean your kids are at the bottom of the list, not at all. And it doesn't mean that if you have to get up in the night with your baby, you're not making him number one. It's making him number one truly in your heart, where he knows that he's number one for you. Even if he's off at work all day long, he's thinking of you. You're number one. It doesn't matter whether Bob's at the hospital all day and I still feel number one. The same thing is true with you. So making him truly number one, and you can read about that more in my book, How to Do That. Learning to understand men. You're drifting apart. What are his needs? What do men need that attracts them to you? And you can get results from this. Results sound so manipulative, but that isn't what we're doing here. Immediately. This is what happened to my mother when she started practicing some of these principles, like the way she greeted my father when he came home from work, even if they came home at different times. Acts of kindness, thoughts of him, going out of your way for him, admiring him, and all those things can really help that to almost overnight. You can have dramatic results with this one very, very quickly.
And this is where you need to study. And this is where I can just imagine ladies watching this and going, oh, well, how do I do that exactly? Well, you need to read the book. You need to read, we have workbooks, we have books, we have these videos, but you have to study it. And all of the really specific things are within the body of.
Particularly the book that's newer, the one that I wrote, Fascinating Woman for the Timeless Woman, because it has so much more in it. So many more tips and helps to understanding him, like understanding the difference between yours and his mind, so the way the male brain and things like that, particularly that book, but study it. And then we have all these videos.
We also did a video on making him number one. You can watch that one. That goes deeper into that and gives specific examples. We did a video about admiration. We've done so many different videos, and they're all in a series on our channel. So you can check out Understanding Men and going through the different things that we've done. So that would be the main. I mean, there's a million things you could focus on if you drifted apart, but I think we wanted to just be very specific, like this is the area where you should tackle if you are,
Well, and in Understanding Men, it'll go into what are men's primary needs.
Yeah.
If your romance is in trouble, number two, you can focus on things like it kind of bleeds again into number one. Admiration, girlishness, which we haven't talked about yet in this one. Girlishness, which you can read about in my book again, and it's how to respond to him in different everyday occurrences in life. Most specifically that women have trouble with is when he is thoughtless, grumpy, snaps, or something like that. How to respond to that where it actually deepens your relationship rather than causes you to not speak for the rest of the day.
We did a video on girlishness that dives, it's a 40-some minute video. It's really long, but if examples of exactly what we mean by that. But I want to ask you though, before you keep going, why does girlishness, I know you said it diffuses things and you don't get into, as many arguments and things, but why would that result in more romance? Men melt when you respond that way. I've heard even my sons talk about they cannot stay mad. It's so charming. Instead of making it worse by you being snarky or saying something sarcastic back, you can not only diffuse it, it can be so charming that he wants to grab you and hold you. Girlishness also includes how to ask for things, girlish joy, how to express appreciation when he does something for you, and several other things like that. It isn't just about dealing with a grumpy man. If you think about it in your life, they're everyday things. That's where marriages start going down, is with everyday things, mostly. With most of it, it's not some catastrophic thing. Right. That we're going along and everything's great. We're on our second honeymoon and boom, I don't trust him anymore. It's almost always
little
Right.
things. And that's why girlishness is so powerful. It's how to handle those things. And
Yes.
then dealing with admiration, admiring him. A lot of times we think things and don't say it. This teaches you to say it and be specific, not general. Like, I admire you. That doesn't do it. You got to be specific. Like, you actually noticed that the way he dealt with customers, the way he handles himself in a situation with people who are not nice, and it list goes on and on. Also, your appearance is another thing we're adding into this. Your appearance, you can work on that, and that will help your romance. Men are visually oriented.
What do you mean when you say, like, what specifically do you mean by working on your appearance?
Men are visually oriented. We talk about that in the chapter on the brain. It's the way their brains are wired. When you regularly, it's not that you can't go to sleep and take your makeup off or anything like that, but when you regularly focus on being as attractive as you can be, and as you get older, it gets harder. It does for me. But you still work on it, and you don't let yourself sink into just throw something on and go about my day. Because men want to feel like they're married to an attractive woman, whatever her age. It doesn't mean she has to be a supermodel, but they want to feel like you take pride in your appearance. And so as you work on that, that makes him more attracted to you, just like it was when he first started asking you out.
I could see a lot of women hearing this part and taking it a little hard because they think to themselves, well, we don't have a lot of romance because I'm overweight and I'm struggling with that right now. What do I do? We hear that all the time. And maybe he doesn't want to be intimate with you because you've gained a bunch of weight. Like, what is the answer for a woman like that?
Obviously, being too overweight is hard on your health. Yeah. So I would say, ladies, if you could possibly work on that, it's hard on your health. It's hard on your leg, your knees, and your back, and everything else. Just for you personally, it's hard on you, and it hurts your self-esteem. So other than that, you can always look the best you can. Look, I'm old, and I can't do anything about that. I can only look the best I can for my age. But if you're overweight, you can do something about that. If my feet are really big, I can't do anything about that, but I can wear shoes that are flattering.
Right.
So, there's some things you can't do anything about. But it doesn't mean you give up. I don't know why so many women my age wear no makeup and don't do anything with their hair. I guess maybe they're sad. I don't know. But you can always do something to make yourself the best you can be.
I agree. And I think you can do that at any size. But I also want to add too, because I hear this so much about weight, is that sometimes he might be giving you this feedback and he isn't really thoroughly in touch with how he feels. He may be picking up on your self-esteem and the way you're presenting yourself along with the weight battles. And meaning you might be a little overweight, but you also may be hard on yourself about it. And your self-esteem may be suffering as a result of that. Mm-hmm. And therefore it's affecting your mood. It's affecting you taking care of yourself. It's affecting the way what you're wearing. A lot of women, when they gain weight after having babies, they kind of give up. They wear, not very flattering clothes. Sometimes they don't bathe regularly. It goes on. And so he might be picking up on all of those things, depending on what's going on, and giving you that feedback. And, you owe it to yourself.
Number one, yeah.
Earlier, to do it for you.
Right.
Not just for him. I think
right.
Sometimes we think, well, that's not fair that he wants me to, lose this weight. It hurts my feelings, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, well, but don't you want that for you? Is that it's not just about, well, he told you to lose weight, so you need to lose weight. No, how do you feel about your weight? How do you feel about your appearance?
If you could wave a magic wand and lose some weight, would you do it? Probably yes. But it isn't good psychology for a man to tell you need to lose weight. It's kind of undermining. Yeah. I'm fortunate that Bob never did that because he knew I was sensitive about it and he knew that I was worried about it.
Yeah, my husband never said anything to me about my weight.
No.
Yeah, I think this one, the appearance part, I just don't want anybody to hear it and think that it's superficial. It's not. It's deeper than that. It's taking, you said it perfectly, it's taking pride in your appearance. It's not trying to be this person that is unrealistic for you. It's about the best.
Men are visually oriented, and some women get mad at men they can't help it. That's the way their brains are wired. Women are more wired for security. And so should we be criticized because we naturally want to feel secure, financially secure, physically secure? It's the way our brains are wired. If trust has been broken, this is complicated because it depends. Sometimes it's too late. and there's not anything you can do. But I've known women whose husbands have cheated on them, and they have practiced these principles, and it's totally changed their marriage. But their husband was basically a good man who was just desperately unhappy. It's
Right.
different than if he is a what we call a cheater. I have seen it depending on the relationship, where a guy was had a mistress for several years. The wife realized a lot of the mistakes she was making, not that that was any excuse, because it wasn't. And she found Fascinating Womanhood. It totally changed her marriage around. It took some years, but it really helped it. But if it's not too late, just like we're saying, if it's not too late, and you will know, because some women, if their husband cheats once, they can never get over it.
Right.
They can never do it. And that's up to the individual. But some women can get past it. And if it's not too late for you, these principles, as long as you feel like the reason he has done this is because of like the many mistakes you've made. Some women have said, oh no, I've made so many mistakes. I drove him away. And so I take some responsibility for that. And this isn't just talking about infidelity. Addictions are tough. Pornography, alcohol, drugs. There's many kinds of addictions. It isn't just those, but they can become like the mistress in a marriage, and where there's three in the marriage, and the one that gets first choice is the addiction, right, whatever that happens to be. So some men are willing to tackle and work on their addictions, and some aren't.
So what is the answer for these people, for these women that do have a chance and you don't think it's too late? What should they focus on?
If you feel like you've played any part at all, like because you've been really critical of him, you haven't been supportive, or any of those things, accepting him at face value, you have to set boundaries and say what you are willing and not willing to put up with. Practice the principles of making him number one, being there for him, understanding him. And that's what has worked for women in the past who have succeeded in overcoming this. And it partly, like we said, depends on, like if it's an addiction, if he's willing to work with it. If he's not, you have to set boundaries in what you can put up with. And if you can't put up with it, we don't like telling people to leave. But if, can you put up with this in your marriage for the rest of your life? If you cannot, make some decisions, get professional help.
I got to say, I probably 99% of the ladies that reach out to us about infidelity, it usually isn't too late. It usually is just one occurrence, or it's early on, or, they've drifted apart, there hasn't been romance, and then the infidelity happens and they catch it and they want to know what to do. For some reason, I don't know why, after talking with a lot of these ladies, it does end up being a boundary thing and a self-esteem thing and then, of course, practicing the principles of Fascinating Womanhood, working on all these things we've talked about, understanding him, admiring him, all those things. But I think a lot of the root of what tends to be an answer for these ladies is working on their confidence, their self-esteem, because a lot of times that's kind of where it started. You know what I mean?
And character.
Yeah, their character.
Yeah.
They kind of feel like victims, which in some cases they are, but most of them, like I said earlier, are repairable because they're early on. Some of them aren't. And that's what these ladies do end up doing to kind of come around full circle, is they have to first start with themselves. Right. And, the lady that has kind of let herself go and put her marriage in the back seat and like all those things they're difficult to hear. It's difficult to
say, because I don't like saying it, because I don't like being critical of anybody. And so we're trying not to be, but if some ladies have let themselves go and they don't appreciate their husbands, and then there's somebody at work that admires everything he does, it's kind of tough.
It's tough. Yeah. So I think, to me, like that would be 2 cents that I would want to say about infidelity, is really invest in yourself as well as your marriage. It's not just about investing in your marriage and doing all these things, but it's about really looking at yourself and saying, well, what can I do? Because what if it isn't repairable? You'll at least come out of it feeling better
about yourself. Yeah.
And if you do have to get into the divorce that you don't want to get into, but you just have to, or you feel like you don't have any other choices, at least you're going to be ready for that next man potentially. And you will be, I don't want to say reborn, but that doesn't sound right.
Well, when you understand your own value, as a woman, and you get in touch with that and you're living that, you realize that you're valuable. and that you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity and have someone honor their commitments to you.
That, and I think what a lot of ladies are missing is that's inside. That's coming from you saying snarky things to your husband and saying, oh, I'm sassy. I love being sassy. Well, that's coming from a place inside that is angry, negative. I don't know. Poor self-esteem. I'm not sure what it is for each person, but
I
it's
think
not
for her, it's
and the only reason why I bring up the whole self-esteem thing and character thing is just, I think it's so much deeper than we realize. I think so many people think that they're fine. Oh, my marriage is fine. But it's really not. And you're making these comments, you're being sarcastic, you're not happy anymore. And you just kind of think that that's acceptable. And
well, if a woman has some of her primary needs met, like for me, one of them is having a romantic relationship. But that aside, if she's safe, she has a decent income, she isn't constantly feeling like she's losing everything, and she's got her basic needs met. Some women can take their husbands for granted and just like, I'm just doing my own thing.
I think that's where you start to feel like roommates, right? That's what I think one of the more common things that are being described to us is like that we're kind of like roommates now. And, oh, he snores at night and I got to sleep in the other room. And like, that's just fine. That's one thing, but how many other things are contributing?
Well, and if you could go back to their marriage, when they got married, when did this start? What started happening? It isn't just like one day. It's suddenly different. It's gradual. And that's why I emphasize stuff with everyday stuff.
Overall, with infidelity as well, focusing on femininity, how you can develop that. We've done videos on that, and really appreciating feminine and masculine roles, I think is a big part. There's a lot of pieces to the infidelity one, and I think it's more of a vague answer just because there's so many different scenarios that could be coming with an infidelity thing. But focusing on these principles, specifically boundaries, your self-worth, your self-esteem, those are really big ones for that situation. Mm-hmm. And it can be repaired. Sometimes it can.
My mother, there was no internet then. She got tons and tons of letters. They were hard letters, and it's kind of cool because we can save them in a box. But
you have them.
I have some of them. Of course, some of them my mother found hard to read, so she typed them up.
Oh,
so some of them are typed, which is fine, and she put them in a book. But there's been thousands and thousands of success stories. It's divine. It really is. It's the most wonderful. The feeling of being in love and having that last is, I think, the deepest, most wonderful human emotion you can have. And this is what Fascinating Womanhood can do for millions and millions of women all around the world. And our goal is to develop strong unions, which develop strong families, which develop strong nations. It doesn't matter what country you're from. People are basically the same. They all want to be happy. They all want to fall in love and get married and have their families and be able to work and be able to be successful at what they do. Human needs are basically the same no matter your culture. And this is what we're trying to do.
I'm sure we could probably make a book of all the success stories. There's that many. So
actually, she did do a little book, but it's not in print anymore.
You should print that.
I have a copy of it, but they're all the ones that she had. We have so many since then.
I would love to read those. Just a side note. Sometimes you want to read a story about how things have progressed because you want to see if it fits at all with your narrative and what's going on with you. So I think it's great that you share all those success stories. I think it's so wonderful that you have some of them. And I think, for anybody that's watching that is in one of these, hopefully the first two, hopefully not the third one, but even if you are in any of these three, I hope that you will trust that this will work and give it a try because it absolutely does. And I say work like it's like a pill, like it's like medicine or something, but it's really just something that
it's principles that you apply, but it's, as we say, works. It isn't manipulative.
Well, this has been a really valuable discussion. Thank you so much for all of your advice and for sharing all of this with us today. If you want to learn more, you definitely need to read Dixie's book, Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman. Definitely recommend the workbook companion that goes along with it, especially if you are in a place in your marriage and you really want to turn things around, like what we've been discussing. That is definitely for you. We also are very active on social media. I'm attaching the links to Facebook and Instagram. so that you can follow us and find us on there and connect with other like-minded women. We have a really active presence on both of those sites, so definitely connect with us on there. And we are here on YouTube every week, so hit subscribe so you know when a new video comes out. And comment down below any questions that you have for us, any future topics you'd like us to cover. We would love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Next time. Bye.